Security protection asset. Of course. So with regards to security protection asset, it's one of the 5 categories that you as an organization seeking certification have to be familiar with. So if you ever heard the term an inventory asset, you actually have an obligation, and this will be part of the evidence that you're gonna have to show CPAO of what you have control and or ownership of. So the first one is called a CUI asset. That is anything that stores, maintains, or processes CUI information as defined by both NARA, the Department of Defense's CUI registry. A security protection asset, which is defined as asset that provides security functions, but does not necessarily have to store or transmit CUI. You have to document it in your asset inventory. You have to document it in your system security plan. It also has to be included in your network diagram for the CMMC assessment scope. So we've all seen what a network topology should look like. And we're going to have some crude versions of that up here later on. But you're going to have to be able to define which each of those assets are. They have to be prepared to be assessed against the CMMC practices that are associated with security protection asset. And then the other categories are what they call a specialized asset, which could be an IT or IoT type of asset. A contractor risk managed asset. This could essentially be, well, quite frankly, a corporate laptop. It could process or store or transmit CUI, but the way that the corporate policies and processes have defined it, it's not designed to do so. There's appropriate safeguards to limit its exposure. And then the last category is out-of-scope asset. So, real life scenario. Here's contestant number 1. So you have a defense contractor that is supporting a large crime. 50 employees. They are tasked with making next generation parts for the F-16 Falcon, be utilized in European combat operations. Contracts and subsequent task orders show that the DFAR 7012 clause has been in place since 2018. We are operating on today's date, 2023. These next generation parts are highly specialized, requires highly specialized machinery, and started to be originally built in 2008. First work has not been submitted. A data call from General Dynamics requires this subcontractor to acknowledge the terms, including conformance with DFAR 7012, 7019, and 7020. Keeping in mind, 7019 is the one that says you submitted your first work. General Dynamics is now asking for the sub for their plan to become CMMC level 2 certified. This is giving you the context of the organization. Do I have any questions before advancing to the next slide? This is a high-level overview of their operations. They have a general office. They have a shop floor. Within the shop floor, they have 2 bay doors for being able to bring in raw materials. They have roughly 45 employees that operate in the floor. Does anybody remember how many employees said that they had total? Which leaves you delta of how many? 5. Exactly. Now, specialized machinery. So this is your shop floor. This is a caged environment. It is a physically caged environment. Think of a cage that's 10 feet high, 20 feet wide by 10 feet. Okay? Key card access is required to get into there. Highly specialized, it's operating on Windows Server 2008. The reason why it's operating such an old system is because the original equipment manufacturer that created the software for designing the parts, it's not capable of being upgraded. There is no wireless network connectivity. It is truly a standalone. You have wireless access points within the shop floor. This allows for ease of use of communications, whether it's a laptop or tablets, whatever the case may be. As you can see, there's a variety of different security cameras. And then you have the general office. That general office, just again from a context perspective, let's say it's about 20 feet away from the shop floor. It's your standard office, one level. And within that one level, you have an open area with a couple different offices. You have an office that's designed for the C-suite, one that's designed for finance, one that's designed for HR. Within that environment, you have the wireless router that was provided by the ISP, which in this case is Cox Communications. You have file cabinets, and you also have one printer. Small business, they don't believe in having to spend money for multiple printers. Okay. So for the first exercise, I'm going to ask, let me go ahead and start taking some notes here. We're going to start with CUI assets. Assets that are meant to store, transmit, or receive controlled and classified information. Would anybody care to take a stab at what might be some of the CUI assets? Control card. The access control card.
A laptop.
Obviously, your laptops for the C-suite, finance, and HR.
Okay, hold on. So I'm getting C-suite, finance, and HR. Okay. Sorry.
Accounting.
Well, that's the.
That's finance.
Yeah, but he's got GCC high, so that means that there's actually nothing stored locally on the
That's operating a presumption that you have a virtual desktop.
Okay.
But so for clarification, there is no virtual desktop environment here.
Obviously, the Windows server, even though it's no wireless and it's a standalone.
Right.
But I would still say it's CUI and probably not even be just unclassified, because if there's certain specs on that F-16, depending upon which parts, pieces, and additional parameters on whatever block items that you're talking about, weapon systems, following infrared tracking, whatever the specialized option is, whatever's on that server is probably going to be covered in that.
Okay, that's a very astute observation. Anybody else?
Points as well, the Wi-Fi points as well.
Wi-Fi, okay. Now, are you talking about this device or this device?
Yes. Yeah. The whole thing.
Yeah, did you stick the Huawei cameras in there?
Yes.
As it got you?
Yeah.
They're not allowed to have it.
There's nothing in our CMMC says you can't.
Right, there's something in the government contract and stuff.
Correct. Yeah.
What about the documents that are in the file cabinet?
Yeah.
Okay.
Printer too.
Printer has memory caching, go ahead and pull it.
Is there security on the bagels?
Is there security on the data? Yeah, I mean, those, we're gonna present the, I'm sorry, for context. Your traditional operation, kind of like garage door style open, but yes, locked, and there is a, well, no, they in this particular case, other than the cameras, they don't have a security system.
It's just basically put their IR remote.
Yep. So,
The printer has storage on it.
no, right, somebody called out the printer. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, so the C-suite, that's actually correct. File folders, really good. Printer, yep. That particular wireless router, firewall, yes. These particular APs, the answer would be no. Okay. That has to be in your inventory. That would not be a CUI asset. And the reason why is because more than just other things would be going through that. Because this is being used corporately. To this gentleman's point, oh wait a second, you're using Microsoft E365 in the GCC high environment, and everything is gonna potentially be stored up there, other than the physical aspects. This becomes a fine line, but for this scenario, the answer would be that would not be a CUI asset. So what else is there? Yep, you're right for that. Now, one thing that is not on this list because I didn't want it to become too much of an eye chart. That doesn't show on here. That IT manager? Flesh and blood, right? Guess what? That is a CUI asset. You need to include that in your inventory of assets. If you have a warm body, if you have an employee or contractor that has access to your corporate environment where CUI is being stored, transmitted, or processed, you have to document that in your inventory of assets. Lesson learned the first time we went through the DIPCAC. I was like, are you kidding me? Really?
You know, technically, if you get it.
Folks, that's why
If you get it in
it's-
counterterrorism.
No.
In that case, is it just the IT manager, or is it anybody that
Anybody.
has access to log on? So you're basically now talking all employees who have.
Well, so in this particular, so I would say that I would say probably the answer is no. Now, here's the reason why. You can look at this and it might be, there might be enough of a business decision. This is again, what I was talking about, duty of care, business rationalization versus conformance / compliance. There may be a business justification, say, you know what? Just make it all. Everybody's gonna be under it. Because you know what, I'm gonna deal with 2 different environments. That's a potential solution. Keep in mind, each seat, GCC pod, is a branded here per person. So rather than focusing on potentially needing 5 people, you're not going from 5 grand to 50 grand. That's a business weight decision that you have to evaluate.
Say that again, GCCI, what?
Microsoft GCC high environment is one of the very, very few environments that the government has just blindly said not good. To the point where I was surprised. So our system security plan has extras from the FedRAMP SSP for Microsoft GCC high. The system didn't even care about that. No, let me just look at the, Microsoft, they call it placement, formal name protection, but basically, you select the services and it tells you what controls that they say that they're responsible for. Like, really? The Department of Defense is just gonna accept a spreadsheet that anybody can manipulate if you wanted to? Okay, but in any event, neither here nor there.
It's bedrock.
Again, but we're gonna talk about that also, keeping in mind. Because that's gonna be one of the topics for the next scenario, is the use of an MSSP, which also changes the dynamics of scope. So, we covered the SPA, the CUI assets. Now, does anybody want to take a shot on what we're gonna construe as a security protection asset?
Definitely, Robert.
Okay. But I'm confused though. We just said that was a CUI asset though.
But it's still a entry point firewall.
Can an asset have more than one designation?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely it can. Absolutely it can. Yes. Okay. So what else?
Key card.
Okay.
Obviously, the bay doors and regular doors and locks and whatever to the office.
Well, that's actually a good point. So I don't have that part with regards to the locks on the general office covered, but you would be spot on. Keeping in mind, again, I want you guys to apply lessons learned from what we went through. If you have keys, physical keys issued to you for that general office, you better well have documented it. Because everyone wants to see sign-in sheets, sign-out sheets. And that is gonna be part of your security protection asset.
And receipt, who all's got what?
Yep, exactly. So, had a lot of things that were covered here. Cameras were called out. Yep. Key card.
How about the actual training that we give these folks, employees? The training,
What about,
as protection.
that's not qualified as a protection asset.
Page.
Well, yeah, so we have a key card, somebody called out the key card to gain access to that cage. Yep.
Your bay doors, again, anything that's gonna give you your external access to in, you need to have
But
something.
agreed, but again, for this scenario, remember, you don't have any security on that, it's just, somebody's just rolling up the bay door. And to your point with regards to, at that point, it's like has a padlock on it, the exact same logic applies to the keys that are in that general office.
Just go example of the application security on the actual on-prem laptops.
Yes, it does, trying to just kind of keep it as high level as possible, but we're actually gonna be talking about that actually gets covered in the second scenario. But to the gentleman's question of, what is it like, as an example, you have CrowdStrike Falcon on your endpoints? Yes, that is also covered, and in your inventory of assets, you need to be able to indicate to that level of software and hardware. Yes, sir.
What is that? CrowdStrike, oh,
So, for the term malware protection,
oh yeah,
antivirus, okay, so CrowdStrike is another vendor that's out there, software. They are arguably one of the better ones, if not, depending on who you're evaluating, but I would say like their competitors are like Cylance, Carbon Black. But they have very, very advanced technologies, but anyway, it's designed for endpoint protection, but it's based in the cloud. And CrowdStrike was at least intelligent enough to understand what was coming. So their cloud environment is actually in a FedRAMP moderate environment. Which again, we had to go through in the government. It was interesting because the first team was like, well, I don't know about that. Somebody on their team was at least the student enough to go, I'm familiar with the technology. I know it's in the FedRAMP nameplate. Guys, move on. We're done here. Just let's move on. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. But again, the key thing here, first off, great feedback and commentary on the physical locks. That was great. But from my perspective, making sure you understand that an asset can have more than one designation is very, very important. So that was one of the core takeaways from this exercise. And also with regards to what the gentleman brought up about the Huawei cameras, again, Huawei ZTE, Kaspersky, make no mistake, these are fully embargoed by our government.
So is that an inspection on both sides? Is that where you're doing that?
That has nothing to do with CMMC.
It's not part of the control.
Yeah, it's, you know, I think it's a little bit short-sighted of the regiment, maybe, but for CMMC, it's not within scope. Also, little nuances for you. In revision 2 of 8.171, there's a control that specifically says your backups must be encrypted using this validated encryption. You know, there's not a control for it. You must back up. What?
That's pretty blocky.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't speak the language even that's.
Thank you. So, also, with regards to timelines, revision 3 is already under development. We anticipate a draft to be released probably early next year, which means that by the time it's out for draft, final comment period, stuff like that, you're still probably looking around 2025 for this next version. What we envision at Soundwave is going to occur based on open source and closed source Intel supports the following. This realizes that in many ways they have controls objectives that are duplicative. So they're trying to consolidate that and get rid of them. But then there's also a high probability that they are in fact going to be adding additional controls that were formerly down in the appendix section. So if anybody here is familiar with this 853, which is designed for federal systems, and revision 5, they stripped that out. Federal, maybe convention for federal. But controls that were in revision 4 in the appendix section got bumped up into the main body. We envision that we are going to see controls that are in the appendix getting bumped up to the main body. So that number 320 objectives may change, may go down, may go up, may be the same, but just something to keep in mind. Okay, now you have these papers in front of you. All right. Right now, the current time is 10:40. I'm gonna give each team 20 minutes. Based on the information that we have available to us. To complete these documents. There's no, again, not finger pointing here. And I'm not gonna sit there and say, oh, your answer was horrible. This is gonna be designed to be able for all of us to be able to learn from one another. There are individuals amongst you that have already been fully trained. There are individuals amongst you that have already undergone assessment activities. So the key is to make sure that you understand for each of these objectives, what you should be looking to accomplish. And then defining if the control is actually met or not met. And remember, if any objective is not met, can the control be met? Nope. Correct. So I will let you guys get to it. I am here to answer any questions that you may have. Some of you, many of you actually have your computers or your smartphones with you. By all means, please feel free to do a Google search on CMMC Assessor Guide Level 2. It can bring you to a PDF. You can actually go and look at each of these controls, and you will see exactly what the assessor is going to be tasked with reviewing.
Because again, I'm in what do you want or some days? What do you need?
Yes. Well, Kathy's are. We're gonna rely on the actual thing, because I'm in contracts. I know enough to be, I say, well. I mean, I know the words, but. You know, I have no assessment.
Slide and look at
Right. Yeah, that's gonna be.
That's why I know this is balanced, but I've never been an exercise like I've never done.
We have more things. We're just like.
I'm not sure.
We're really not. Much more than. What I.
Well, I think we could use a file. It was right after. Correct. Yeah. Okay.
Result that you have to get rid of paper. I'm gonna get back to this.
This was gonna be. He's trying to.
So we want to verify, validate their.
Anyway, you did. What I think you want to do is you have to understand why these controls to fail. I saw you get better luck based off.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Or those two, it's reflected on the hard comments like next one. 4 years up.
Gotcha. All of that seems that's.
Level 2 says required.
For embedding.
Here we go.
Should we put them out?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, no problem. Yeah, it's right.
So I'm just finished. I'll start with this. Pretty much blocked through. Right. Yeah. You got an API, it sells me your hard drive, your shredder back here, okay.
Five on this.
Okay, it's not.
Security, broadcast, and say, SSID, and all that. Give them all that offer.
You know, I had the same thing.
Yeah, we looked
Going
at
to the
how.
place to you guys make sure we do this, they think you think it's not.
Spreader, I was thinking about trash, that gonna be kind of just how are they exposed? That's not real.
That's what I was.
Gonna be pretty
Yes.
Destroys.
We do that. On
You know,
board.
and this wasn't too long, someone was sponsoring.
We got CMMC.
Printer again, printer again. So as long as the temperature is the highest, then it's control on the solid gas.
But that's how she's going to roll. Area process.
From a physical perspective too, the tell servers are gonna get a certain temperature. Where they can actually, or like it had a, some type of like natural disaster, right? Like flooding, fire.
Supposedly golden back is required.
Okay, so. Yeah, here's the model. Here's the model.
I think that's much. Okay, so kind of recap. What's you saying?
So.
So printer access from like the card,
That's device.
There's a separate control to go into this. How did I get to the server there? We try to get it, it's also.
That's been
Who's authorized, the making process is a baseline.
Correct, sensitive data being disposed of properly, file cabinets locked.
You try to kind of assume.
I said hard stop.
Yeah, I those should be.
Yeah, that's.
Process is everything on your behalf, it's not like.
So I have.
Most big.
I have a problem, right? This is a big, role this part.
Right.
And I realized that that's already. Access again, and then it's quite ready. Some percent of the juries, there's acted as a game that you're right, that's what it acted. Because.
I would say.
So actually,
That's more involved.
So
So I
like,
got
here's
First of all, here's the identified, readily
I got lucky.
Where I got
Yeah.
Yeah, it is one of them. It is one of them. Yeah, it's one. It's- Oh, wait, it's on the next page.
I'd lie to you if I said I do it. I haven't even-
If you have such a long, this can't be water.
So the access. User, I mean, the points that they don't have access to.
Stands.
In their area. And they get into the general office.
I would say they identify what makes access to the office. So obviously, HR and the county hasn't been identified in that per se, or laptops are. But
That's not the one.
Okay, so that covers there.
On the building or in the, just did anything.
Exactly. If you find it or you have bad examples.
For visitors, there's a sign.
So- They've identified. the
Separation.
agenda.
I'm talking about.
Actually, high grade was tricky. So I heard access to the cave.
How do you
Yeah,
document
that was actually, so.
For
How do you
active
sweep
record, I
the
can,
usually I would say
critical access
right now, right? I mean, like,
file cabinet, printer, and wire access. So it looks like the red dot, what they have identified.
I was thinking, since this.
So I would say.
Virtualized excerpt.
Data.
And all the IP access to the host, and they have ways out there.
Take that server, encapsulate it,
Metal.
kind of, Go on. They might be guys. I've got manufacturers who have. Our rates, we didn't sell and receive updates.
I'm not worried about those.
So at that point, you just.
Fair to infer that
Separation.
separation of duties
So.
are reflected in this.
All that area.
Obviously, it's-
That's what it's.
That's what it is.
Right, that's.
The answer I'll tell you is yes, they might.
It's just gonna be-
State could assume that's in.
If we have a specialized machinery that operation and duty special windows are connected. So yes, they have authorized it. Everybody knows that these stuff.
Yeah.
Do they have not?
Let me ask you guys.
That's since we, I don't know what scenario, what the scenario was to say.
Good, I think we're going to be. Yeah, system gain, oh, I understand. That helps. Right now. We got the access control and then we started.
So you're right to
Live fire example over here.
We also have more access control up and down.
I don't.
That's what I'm saying, it's like that.
Yeah, that is the. Requiring separation of the sign.
Yeah.
So we got.
They're all identified. The devices are identified. So I'm saying if they're all identified, the question is, you got DE and a system access. Process.
Cleaning crew. Oh, that's.
And
Bob.
access to the access device that would be the SDA.
Excellent privilege.
Router has the access on one firewall, you have the cameras to be able to go to some kind of push the button in their bar, which that. I would almost like that, because he did say that they.
And the reliability on these, oh, we got them all on this. So the cameras, you know, have you ever seen anybody had to go back?
I would say.
So.
Be safe.
Because they don't have to be. They want to explore that.
The assessment.
Identifying what they have is, yeah, wrong.
They have to.
So it's big way to handle that.
Service delivery.
Yeah.
And
Have vulnerabilities they've been barred. You can't, so.
More times.
Or not be clear one for separation, so, yeah. Well, it's just access is limited to.
They have contact.
Yeah.
So they at least have to be a level. So you have to go off.
Yeah.
Because what they're doing is it's like.
That area there.
I forgot, Tony's.
It's the SBA.
And remember, they mixed them together, and they put the little string, and they finally got the Tony's in place. That's how the mushroom.
Yeah, that's all right. There's.
They're collecting all of our local.
There's
There's no wireless inside the building, inside that shop.
We talked with the
But there's
contractor.
a wireless router. See,
Let's go to the line of the.
there.
So wait, we're going to a federal building. And where is the circle?
Yeah, that's wireless. The wireless on the fire.
He didn't get it.
It's not air gas, actually. Wireless.
Yeah, but it does.
That's not, that's a. The local network. or-
There's other things. I have internet.
There's other-
The question on this is super expensive.
They pay approval for that.
And that's the only conversation I really check the line. That makes sense. Yeah, again, the fact that they had, you know.
That's a
Whatever.
procedure.
You know, I gave you that, I gave the food service question, the actual base, I think.
What's the response?
Yeah,
Those
the
are
contractor.
response.
The base
What,
stuff,
being
yes.
done. Regardless of which
Like that.
product or not. Now,
You know, for
that
the
being,
fire vendor.
any DOT, you might want to check. Maybe, but.
They don't have to see.
Right, and make sure.
Basically, they-
From the training we've received, that's exactly.
Well,
Cleaned up.
yes, well, that's.
I guess. Yeah, we're guys that.
If you're the contractor.
I would say my vote is.
So now, if you were working that sauce.
Yeah, we're a subcontractor. So we're the ones being split down.
Yeah, I was there very long. I was only there for 6 years. I did 94 through 2000, yeah, in uniform 3 to house.
They bring somebody in. Shades. They have somebody. They have.
I always laugh.
That's probably, yeah, my last college, I was.
First starting my career.
Around Wesley Gap or doing 80 miles a day work.
One thing I saw.
Is that a very 9:30 in the morning, yeah, slide another, but.
Oh, they were, I knew exactly what you're talking about.
And then I'll walk in and down.
I'm
Maybe
like,
there's a new one for cigarettes.
A lot of the Chick-fil-A, the T-bones, the dog, or the vaccine.
Helps you. I can't speak.
Somebody checking her from.
Well, parents and guys. So yeah, it's, there are some.
Cut mom out of the car. See, mom, you have calls off to Brady. People on the dog. I mean, mom died at Grady.
I mean, the ball is right there.
So when.
Well, the enforcement check.
If I can't do it, one of his.
Yeah, any training.
In my first one. Four minutes.
So this once a year.
I'm scared. That's the entire.
You know.
For that.
Exactly.
Doesn't surprise me. Hey, everybody, 2-minute warning.
Yeah, it's fair to the border stuff. Actually.
Yeah. That's
They do, that's part of this. So even if there's a vulnerability part of it. Qualified, and you go and say, hey, you got it, that they are not. Lying. Because of the embargoes.
Robert Red.
No, that Robert Redford's a snake. I didn't watch that one again.
But they,
That's all right, that's why.
That's fine. I'll say that it's still bad.
It's a separate.
All right, so on to, how many, separation duties?
It's like the user, right?
Granting access versus.
I'm not sure what the process is to have, but obviously, right. Right.
But you can put that on the base, like, you're allowed to do all that school wide,
So I guess the difference between that's one from got is different tabs.
Well, that's why.
anyone. Really can't. Anyone.
What is it?
Work on there, we're asking if that's, that, or you just close to that. It's wireless through firewall. Provide access to the files, somebody have access.
Yeah.
That doesn't.
But if you remember the key part, that's the salary of the other
You've been doing this for so long.
All right, everybody, time's up.
Well, that is a separate building, but even.
Time's up. Time's up. That's what we have.
Yeah.
I think.
I like for each team to figure out who you want to be your spokesperson. Go try.
Apparently, I just got off the phone for us, even though I have no clue what we're talking about here, so.
So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go through each control. We're gonna go around the room and then we're gonna figure out what the responses were for each one. I'm interested to see what your feedback is on how each of the objectives are being met or not met, how the control is being met, not met, and again. Nobody should ever claim that they have all the answers. Including myself. So the goal is for me to be able to use my background and experience on not only evaluating your responses, but you might be able to learn from one another and you might sit there and say something and you might sit there and go, oh, I didn't even think about that. That's actually a really great way of being able to address that. So you're able to collaborate and do peer evaluations as well. So with no further delay, we're gonna start focus on 3.1.1. With a typo there, a comma, but 3.1.1, very first control in the series for access control. So I'm gonna start with group again, group 1, group 2, group 3. Group 1.
All right, so you're going through A, B, C, D, E, and F.
Yep.
On our notes, so are the authorized users identified? Well, if you go over to the other page, it looked like they were, you had your C-suite at their levels, yes. We said HR and accounting on ours that we identified up on the board, your little dots, you didn't have HR and finance identified.
Correct, because I'm messing around, those are not UCUI.
Okay. So for those who would say that, yep, all the assets were identified because you even went to the cage, you had your IT department and the IT head working on.
I'm gonna pull in that great, this is a great example. How are they identified? You're saying, well, I've identified them. You get hit by a bus.
Go back to this, well, go back to the other scenario of the original part, because it was like, okay, who's on first, what's on second, so go back and read us to the report. So you got 5 employments, including IT manager at the cage. Oh, too bad. Yeah, not so fast, Bob.
Yeah.
There we go, okay, so subcontractor, a total of 50 employees. Gotta meet these requirements as far as it's not been submitted. That alone, we already know is. Is this for the trying for them to get their initial CMMC?
Yeah, so let's just say, for sake of argument, you're either doing this in-house. Well, yeah, I mean, that's what we're really trying to focus on. This is your company, this is the company that you're working at. And here's the scenario that you currently have at your lab.
So we need to get level 2 certified, so right now. I'd say we're gonna have to probably create some of this as an open call, because again, asking back to saying the users were identified, we tagged C-suite for sure, and then the individuals at the cage, and then the rest of the people out there doing the physical building.
But how are they being identified?
Database or something like ours.
I'm guessing database, the fact that they have access to their little cat car to even get in there, so that little.
Is a list in Active Directory sufficient?
Oh.
Why?
There's no physical control of that. You've got digital reflected, but you don't have any type of ID card or CAD card or any type of reflection to get in the building, right? So.
Okay, but is it safe to argue that you could also say, but I can pull those records electronically for who's got the key cards.
But it's a Monday morning and 3 people walk up to the door. Who are you? I'm new. I came in from Tennessee.
Fair enough. What we're trying to get to is, do you already have a documented list? From a corporate perspective. Does aerodynamics have an actual list that's maintained by somebody? That can then be used to cross-check against Active Directory. That can then be used to cross-check against key card swipes.
Right.
Things along those lines. That's ultimately what we're trying to get to with this. Because if you don't have a separate unique document, the ability to simply say, well, I've got Active Directory, that's it, okay, well. If you're a 5-person company, you're gonna be able to eyeball that pretty quickly. If you're a 50-person company and you have any rate of transitioning in, transitioning out, I'm sorry, I'm not gonna buy it. There's no way you're gonna be able to go, yeah, that's a good list. You're gonna have to be able to tie that directly to the onboarding process, the offboarding process. And this is also one of the unique challenges within CMMC and in compliance regimens, regardless if it's ISO, HIPAA, whatever. You have to be able to show those interdependencies between the controls. And just so you understand, even if this, because this is a level 1 control, level 1, you self-assess, right? If this is not passable, guess what? You can't assess that, oh, we're in compliance. This is one of the controls you cannot have a POAM on. So by default, even if you're at level 1, you're already going down that path of willfully misrepresenting the security posture. Okay, so that was for A. What about Bravo? We're gonna go team 2.
Oh, and what your frugal poem is?
The get well plan.
Okay.
Yeah, your get well plan. So for team 2, let's go with objective B. Processes acting on behalf of authorized users are identified.
That's the facts. So from a physical perspective, I think they touch base on the baseline, right? You know, access to cage, access to the big doors, key card, like just to the suite office. Right, exactly. So for, you know, conversation's sake, it should be geared more toward a digital perspective. We discussed role-based access. It'd be healthy to have microsegmentation, you know, to pay for employees to really have access to the entire database. HR. Let's see. Network encryption, we were concerned about, is this really an air gap network? No, it's not. It's actually connected to the outside world. So that causes authorization concern from the outside world. See anything else, guys, that we thought was
The hardware was access to manipulate the hardware, the IT infrastructure that's in place for its privilege levels. You have what it says, one IT guy. But who's he work with?
It wasn't one IT guy, or he was just the head of IT, he had the other 5 guys in.
Well, okay, so you guys are on the right track. Yeah. We're not gonna have time to get into such nitty-gritty detail, but you guys are on the right track, and that's the goal of this exercise. Now, before we go to team 3, what would you guys say for C Charlie? Devices and or systems authorized to connect to the system are identified. What would be an artifact that you might want to capture that in? Your system security plan.
okay.
Your network topology should be able to clearly visualize that. Right?
So X devices are authorized. This type of OEM with this type of.
So if I'm an assessor and you're saying that you have this in your network topology, what do you think would be a logical additional artifact that I'm going to ask to see? Inventory of assets. Yep, and is that in alignment with what you're conveying on your system security plan and you put in your network topology? All right, let's go over to team 3.
What about, I'm sorry, what about logs, system logs to see did any device actually get on?
That's actually covered in a different control, but love the way you're thinking, but that is actually called out, but that's in a different control family. That's actually under the auditing, the AU family for that. Okay, so we go with team 3. D, system access is limited to authorized users. Now keep in mind, the system, for the purposes of a CMMC evaluation, It's not only the digital, it's also the hard copy. So, what's your response to D?
Dennis, there was a lot of discussion over here without a lot of time management. So while we threw out a lot of real world examples, I don't think like all the time, we're like, wait a minute. So.
Can I respond? Okay, all right, so,
We had access escorts.
Yeah.
And escorts that active directory authorized user with unique ID key cards, and then escorts for any police privilege, if they have roles. Maintaining those roles at the desk. Specific key card access badges and whatnot, badging.
Yeah, but as far as an employee that wasn't, onboarded or just walked in and said, I'm new here, there'll be a holding area. Or until someone can verify that you allowed out on the floor, you're not going to the front. And that's
Okay.
part of policy.
and then again, that's fine, because again, you're given a snapshot. I'm asking you guys to come up with unique responses, and you guys can craft your responses however you want. So, in the interest of time, team 3, system access is limited to the processes acting on behalf of authorized users. Well, it's kind of like the joint. System access is limited to processes and authorized devices. Because again, they're kind of like enjoined based on the last 2 objectives. So team 3, how would you respond to that in your system security plan?
Again, you have, the roles for the different processes.
Okay.
Least privilege.
Okay.
For the different users. Access to authorized devices, again, they should be in the Active Directory listed there, and asset inventory.
Okay, great. So something to keep in mind with regards to privileged accounts versus non-privileged accounts. When you're in Active Directory, just helpful hint. When you're defining who has access to the privilege level, that needs to be a completely, so if you have a system administrator and you're showing that person's account in general user and privileged account, you just failed. That individual needs to have a unique, different account. It's like as an example in Soundwave. Mine is c.schoenberg, that's for general. For privileged, it's carter.schoenberg.p. That way it is clearly definable for anybody that's looking at it. Yeah, I'm in there, I can see it's clearly different. And the reason why you have to take that approach is because at some point you're going to have controls that say, if you're a privileged user, you're only doing privileged functions. You're not taking on these non-privileged functions and activities. Specifically when it comes to security protection assets. Now, let's get the $64,000 question. Is this control met? Is 3.1.1 met? Anyone? Bueller?
I'm gonna say no, there's some vulnerabilities there
I
that,
got 2 no's. What say team 3?
No.
Okay. Why?
For one, there's not a unique identifier.
Yeah, the uniquely identification of the process.
Any part of
roles
it.
and access.
It's either met or not met.
So
Who was C-suite?
when I look at this environment over here, there's no level of separation between HR, finance, and the C-suite. And all of them have equal access to that printer. So in this particular case, control would not be met. Recommendations may include things such as, again, it's not exclusive. These are examples. Reconfiguring your local area network. Maybe the C-suite has a new printer exclusively in that office that is designed specifically for the purposes of printing CUI. File cabinets exclusive for CUI purposes, also in the C-suite office. That's just like one example for a recommendation. Okay. So now we're gonna go to separation of duties. Again, just in the interest of time, because we have another exercise to go through. Has separation of duties been met here? Let's start with team 2. What say you?
I think it's up in the air. I think that the data on the slide wasn't reflected more in depth. So I've got 45 employees on the bay. Okay, and what's this team doing here? It just
Okay.
wasn't reflected on this, right?
Fair enough.
And you said.
Let's say team one.
Ideally, no. You go back and look, I mean, you've got a little bit of separation per se, you've got 45 employees total in the bay. Okay, 3 doing like the warehouse, forklifting, moving. 5 employees, that includes your IT manager, that I'm assuming hangs up in the general office, comes back and forth. Okay, so if you take out those 8 there out of the 45. Okay, well, what are the other guys doing? How do we know that those guys don't get access somehow to the cage or bypass to go in, or that, you know, you didn't identify it up there, but we brought it up. Okay, we got bay doors to get in and out of the shop floor. Who has access to get in and out of the general office? Like you said, if it's not even remotely separated and branched out, locked down, because you're just showing, I mean, it could be an open bay office like this, the general office, the CEO's in the corner, HR's here, and
Okay. Let's say team one.
say, no.
I'm sorry, team three. Team three.
From what I can tell, the separation of duties is good with the cage. However, in the office, the general office, because you've already talked about the access to the printer, to the people that are in HR and finance versus the C-suite, that's not gonna be acceptable there.
So-
The employees in the Bay Area, that's just a punt. I mean, they're gonna be there. So I would say that it's really relegated to the general office. I think the efficiency would be.
So each of you has presented very, very unique ways of defining whether it's met or not met. And oddly enough, again, learning a lesson from me as well. You each are along the same lines of how you're interpreting what that control is asking for, but ultimately all of you are wrong. What this control is asking for, under the goal of separation of the duties, is something is going wrong on the network. Who in that office do you think is gonna be responsible for responding to an issue? Out of all those people,
The IT manager,
correct? Who has oversight over the IT manager?
CEO.
The CEO trained to look at an audit log? No, I'm just telling you right now, unless it's in that real big outlier, no. And there was this notion of, oh, well, the person in HR can watch over that person. That was actually in 2020, 2021, something that was being socialized. It just says you have that separate. Well, fine, but I'm telling you right now, under the training one, because you have role-based training, if you have the person that's saying, well, this is the oversight person, and that oversight person cannot show definitively how he or she has been trained to provide that oversight, that's a no, that's a not met, that's an immediate fail. Okay,
In a small company like this, the IT person,
can't wear both hats.
So then the CEO would probably have to have the hat.
Well, not necessarily the CEO, but somebody has to have some level of training to provide that oversight. Oh, and also, we're gonna talk about use of third parties, like an MSP or an MSSP.
that's okay.
Okay, and a lot of smallers are just going, you know what, I'm just gonna outsource it to that, which would qualify. That's, remember I said earlier, CMMC, let's also look at like business perspectives. Because we're dealing with one of our clients right now. If something goes wrong, who gets notified? The IT manager does. What is the IT manager in question? Who gets notified? The IT manager. So something you might want to think about in terms of how you structure your service level agreements with your third parties. Under all these conditions, that person. If that person is the target of the investigation, ops gets notified. Just food for thought. Now, does not having that definition in your SLA going to disqualify you from meeting CMMC? Unfortunately, no. But again, from a business perspective, things you need to consider. You may reference to, the virtual desktop environment. Well, if you have a virtual desktop environment, you can actually make an argument, well, I'm a small home-based business, and if I'm doing it all there, I can do it that way. I got 10 people, I'm not worried about it. And that also precludes the government from actually coming to my home and looking at my physical structure, because my home address is the address on record with that contract. While that is academically correct, VDI for Microsoft GCC High is $200 per person per month. That's $24,000 a year. You know, please come to my house. Here's my Simply Safe, here's my door locks, knock yourself out. But again,
We're actually implementing a more business premium where the group policy lockdown from the top, there's
Mhm.
no exfiltration of data from the device. So it doesn't have to be GCC high.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. There's other solutions that are out there that are looking to do this as well. But again, the goal isn't here to sit there and say which solution is right, which solution is wrong. Just want to kind of get you guys thinking about the process. All right, so access control that separation of duties is not met. What about system change management? I'm gonna start with team 2 this time. What do you think? Again, there was not enough detail on this slide. But you guys can craft your responses however you want. As the assessor, I'm gonna evaluate your responses.
We looked at each other at this one and said there's a lot of speculation because we're supposed to be data reflect on the slide.
Okay, all right, and that's fair. And you know what? This is a great observation for me for next versions of trying to do this workshop. So great feedback. What's 18.3?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Same thing, I don't glean anything.
I think we're on the same thing. It's like we need some more data to figure out exactly if you wanted to say, but for the sake of, since so far we're in non-compliance the other two, I want to say, yeah, they probably don't, because I mean, you've got some of these other fail safes to go on. Is the IT manager, it goes back to what you just had with the first, the separation of duties. Well, assuming a lot of the, if we're looking at from a system standpoint, that the IT manager is ultimately going to be in charge of that for tracking, reviewing, approving, disapproving, and logging changes to those systems.
You know, for somebody that says they don't get it, you sure seem to have a pretty good beat on this.
Well, again, having been in the Air Force and done all of I've been on the inspection side. You give me a criteria, tell me what I'm supposed to go look at, show me, I can figure it out quick. But so far, it just seems like, yeah, they're epically failing on a small company.
Okay. And then and I'm gonna go ahead and say, yes, sir.
Could you give us some examples then? I mean, predicated on your own scenario, what would you say would be some system change management controls?
First off, do you have a running log that's documenting what those changes are? By whom, on what date, what was done? So that way you have an understanding of if there's a crisis event, what was the last known good image that you have of your environment? Who has access to those logs for the story?
Since they have a managed, with Microsoft 365, they would probably say, oh, they're good managing it for us, therefore there's a separation, therefore change management is on them.
That's not correct.
Yeah, it
That's
doesn't.
absolutely correct. So how many?
That's her story, and guess what?
Yeah, well, you know,
That doesn't cover December 2008.
that's a great topic of discussion because,
I've encountered this, that's why.
yeah, so how many people here show hands? Only from FedRAMP?
Yeah.
Okay, now, a lot of companies are like, well, I'm FedRAMP, I'm in the FedRAMP enclave.
Yeah.
Well, again, just a second there, Professor. Even if you're in a FedRAMP enclave, that accounts for about 68% of all the known controls. As the system owner, you still are responsible for over 30+% of those controls. Same thing applies with Microsoft GCC Hive. They are providing you the environment. There are physical, there are operational safeguards, there are technical implementations. However, the lion's share, there's actually not one control that is completely inherited by Microsoft. They're, in the best case, all co-shared. Well, that are applicable. Sorry.
That's what I'm saying, is I've encountered a company that just said, well, all of our change management is handled by Microsoft. And documented by them, so, you know, that's not happening here in office.
Right. No, you.
By the way, you're in compliance because you have your two-factor authentication set up. Part of it's 2 months up.
Kathy, how do you counter that when someone is steadfast in their belief that it is good enough?
Yeah.
And here they're like going,
Yeah.
this is what we think, and you're going, well, no.
Yeah.
So how do you manage that discussion? Because that seems to me like.
Was there something more in the meat potato?
Charge, be quiet.
You just tell them.
In that assessment,
You're late, right? That's right.
They go like further, and they talk about these, they
wanna go the easy route, they don't.
And that, again, anybody that's gonna sit there and take that argument, again, I, horrible name. Break out the placemat.
Yeah.
What services you have? Okay, because then what it's gonna do is within that placemat, this particular control, boom, more likely than not, it's gonna be blue. Blue means it's co-shared. And they even call out specifically what the client is responsible. That is a very, very definitive way. Well, Microsoft does it, but no, they don't, not according to this, which came from Microsoft since we're third.
Yeah, we're using Prevail, it's the same kind of system.
Okay, so again, I didn't want to be name dropping. I want everybody to be clear on this. This is not Carter's opinion. I don't care about the product one way or the other. I'm completely agnostic. Prevail has FIPS encryption. They are under review right now. Do they have FedRAMP moderate equivalency? The disposition from the cyber accreditation body is set to take place next month. It is possible. I repeat, it is possible. It may not turn out the way people were thinking it was. So, again, I don't have anything for, I don't have anything against the technology. I've seen the technology, I've seen the improvements that they've made in the technology. And I think it definitely has some great capabilities to it. But according to the cyber accreditation body, if you're using a solution and it's cloud-based, in this case, it is cloud-based, and it's a security protection asset. Until such time that they either get themselves CMMC level 2 certified, until that point, they are going to have to be in a FedRAMP moderate environment. That is the best information I have as of a week ago from the cyber accreditation body. So as of April 2023, still under review by the cyber accreditation body to be determined. Hopefully, they get blessed, everything's fine, rock and roll. But you brought the name of the company. I just want to make sure everybody here has visibility into that. Okay. So quickly, we're going to spend like 60 seconds on this. What would you say that you learned out of this exercise that you didn't expect when you came into it?
It's a lot.
There's so much subjectivity to help what you determine is what's acceptable of that.
And while I agree with that, as long as you have enough information to support the basis of your subjectivity, you're fine. Me too.
Well, I learned that I go on site and actually do an inspection so that I can gather a bit more information. I actually do document review, I do interviews, and then I'm able to fill out a scenario like this in a better
Correct.
fashion. So I mean, just as a CMMC professional, I felt a little humbled here at first, and I said, I'm gonna listen to the master here. But I realized that, wait, I've collected more information.
Right.
Yep.
So I'm flying a bit.
ET, what do you guys learn out of this?
All the same.
We have more to, the questions can seem very surface level, but you're really gonna understand the context.
Exactly. Spot on. And team one.
I'm gonna echo the same thing. The biggest thing that I'm trying to learn, of course, as we really get knee deep is, of course, look at the CMMC guidelines. But as we're going to, like, you had the 4 different ones that do meet this, this, and this, which, to be honest, we didn't get to the last 2, but I'm still looking at, I gotta go back and look at NIST SP 800-171A and know what's in that to really understand. Does that help solve some of the subjectivity of
Correct.
what
Now,
they're saying? So you really gotta know what are your cross-reference sources to be able to try and counteract or make your argument for.
so while FCA has recorded this presentation will be made available to all those that attended. Okay, so we'll get this emailed over to you.